Let's begin. Good afternoon, everyone. So, if you have watched the video, you already got a pretty good response possibly, and you might have already questions about the 6 steps that we have been facing in the classroom, the questions, how those 6 steps work here. So let's go through in brief, before I move to, we have been practicing synthesizing sources, and we chose one passage, and in this passage we have 19 sentences, and these 19 sentences are part of a literature review. Various sources, more than 2, 3, 4 authors have been sourced here, have been cited in various techniques, and we have been dissecting those techniques, trying to understand and analyze how it works, what's the structure of it, what kind of tools we use, the writing tools at the back of our mind when we write sources, when we mention multiple sources. So that's the task we have been doing in the last class, and we're continuing it. So in this 19th sentence, we talked about 6 steps. 6 steps. First, we set a goal, and we got the goal here. Let's say, I don't know if it has a laser or not. It's a new kind of a thing. Have you seen this? It's they changed it. It is a years before. Anyway, so the previous one had a laser, right? So that's easier. Anyway, so I'll use my hand. We got the goal that it's investigating why certain environmental sounds are unpleasant to human minds. Humans respond that they feel uncomfortable. Let's say this is an environmental sound, or scratching on board, it's an environmental sound. That's kind of, oh, you have, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. This is the one? Yeah, gotcha. So, in these 19 sentences, let's get back to the slide. I also sent you the slide. I guess you have seen the slide. So we performed a task, but I didn't respond to your solutions that you have figured out in the classroom. These are the 6 steps in the synthesis or synthesized paragraph we were trying to locate. And I'm assuming, I'll get back to you right now. I'll not talk much. I want your queries. But I'm assuming that maybe the main problem we find is overlapping. So which one I should consider as a comment, which one as a summarize, or I have said maybe sentence 13 is step 5, but you think sentence 13 is step 4. So I want that discussion right now. And it could be both. It's not like what I wrote in the slide is the only right form. Could be your opinion, might be the right one too. So if you remember, then can we get back to that discussion? Yeah? Just let me overview the whole thing. So I have to use 2. To change the slide, I have to use this. And to laser, I have to use that. I guess there is no objection in step 1. Anyone has any argument that I don't think this is the goal? We all got it? The goal? The goal is to set investigating unpleasant sounds, the reasons of unpleasant sounds.
Why we didn't say that the goal is to understand why this from...
You mean why the writer didn't write the goal word?
The goal, why the goal is not the second sentence only? Why we need the first sentence also?
Then what would you say about the sentence 1?
Because what is our goal from this is to understand why these sounds blah, blah.
Yeah, this is the goal, but we will not understand this because we have a pronoun here, this.
So I should refer to the first one.
Yeah, if you take this word, these, out, then you need to put this whole first sentence in the pronoun these.
If we have it, so...
You can have it in one sentence.
Okay.
That answers your question, yeah. So now, here they have used these, and to understand what is this these, we need sentence 1. That's why I wrote sentence 1 and 2. Good?
Okay.
Whatever research materials we'll be looking into. So we'll be looking into all the investigations on scrapping sounds. So you are categorizing it. You're not only bringing multiple authors and sources on the board, but before you start, you put a general category, you titled it, right? That will be investigating scrapping sounds within the category of the blah, 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 blah. So now we are expecting only this. So this is the found research material category. We got it. Any questions here in step 2? Leads. I have shared 3 leads. That is step 3. Leads as in, first lead is when the writer is talking about frequency, based on frequency. So this frequency, human mind find unpleasant. That's one lead. Another lead, the writer brought not about frequency, but talking about vestigial reasons. We all know the word vestigial. Through the evolutionary process, it's a biological term. Parts of organs that we do not use or do not function. That's vestigial. There are many organs that we do not use, but we have it. So there could be some vestigial reasons, and the reason this particular claim is done, but with the evolutionary reason, like comparing it with the monkeys or apes, they also find the same thing unpleasant. So that's the logic that was brought on board. So one is talking about only frequency. That's one lead. Another, the lead shifted to a biological reason. By the way, frequency is also biological, right? The way we hear, to what extent we hear and we don't hear, and what we like. So that's talking about sounds. Now vestigial. Now another, the third lead is talking about visualization. That's the 3 lead we found in this passage. We all agree with that? I didn't find any other leads. If you have found, you can tell me. So in sentence 4, 6, and 15, we found 3 leads. Step 4, comments. This is pretty easy to identify. When someone is commenting, that means it's the writer's voice, not the source author's voice. If you have any confusion there, we can argue with step 4 and 5 right now. We can have that discussion. So with this kind of phrases, this differs from the very early research. That means it's the writer who wrote this. It's a comment. In other words, that means before this sentence, something was cited. And now you're extending that author's citation in your own words. So it's a comment. Whenever you'll extend someone else's theory, that means I'm commenting on it. I'm bringing my interpretation there. This is another keyword we would say. In other words, that means I will interpret the source author. Gotcha? And these are the phrases, I also talked about all these in the video too. These are the phrases that shows it's the writer's comment, not only citations. You're adding your comments. Any confusion in step 4? Anyone? All good? Then again, this theory is in a little bit of false position, so that means it's definitely a comment because of this and that. This finding is calling into question Blake's theory. So this writer is not fully supporting Blake's theory because after providing Blake's theory, saying it can be questioned. So it's a comment, right? After that, we have this step 5, and in these sentences, we see either summarization or an example or explanation or illustration. It could be in all these 4 forms. That's not a comment. That's it comes with an example or illustration. Now, example could be citation also, or example could be my voice also. It can happen in both ways. So we have done, let's say, for instance, this is a phrase that shows that it's an illustration of a theory that was said just before this sentence. Now here, when we use concluded that, so something is being explained here. And definitely the conclusion is a summary of that Blake's theory. So that's why it's either summarization, and I'm not commenting here. This is not comment. Step 4 and 5, if you're confused about that part, so I'm just differentiating what things make it really unique, what is step 5 and what is step 4. 4 is comment. This is not comment. Another, McDermott and Hauser, what they have explored, that's also either an example or a summarization. Here they have brought actually an example. Blackboard scrapping sounds, a particular reference, an example. And when talking about that visualization, even if we don't hear the sound, even if I tell you to imagine that someone is scratching a board, you'll feel the same unpleasantness. So this is also another example or illustration of that theory. So step 5. Any question about step 5 now? We're good to go? Step 4 and 5? If you have confusion, we can have a discussion. Step 6 is pretty easy because that's gap. So it's pretty obvious and literal when the gap is mentioned. All these researchers have some unclarity. So it's clearly mentioned with words. That's why new researches has to be done. Now, how that this gap will be occupied, that we do not mention in literature review. We mention in introduction, we call it move 3. Just giving you a reminder. In introduction, we have move 1, 2, and 3. We set up the context. We talk about the gap in a brief 1-2 sentence, and we mention how we will occupy it. That's introduction. If you're separating introduction and literature review, then we do not mention how we will occupy this gap. We do not mention that in literature review. In literature review, we talk about what previous research works have done and said, and why that's not sufficient enough, but your paper will respond and fill up that gap. So now we got the gap. That means we can expect this paper in its discussion section, in the later chapters, this gap will be filled up. All good? Questions? So the 6 steps, the confusion we had, pretty clear. And those who couldn't attend the last class, did you guys read the passage? Awesome. No question? You can ask questions.
Could step 1 and step 6 be combined?
Now that's the point. Goal and gap might have certain differences. Always not necessary that has to be the same. The goal is to investigate all these things. But the gap is that you find out when you counter every resource materials you're sharing and you reach to a gap. That's not the goal, that I will find a problem here. That's not a goal. I'll investigate this, that's a goal. The goal is not to find flaws in everything. You know what I mean? The goal is to study these things. And why? To understand the reason. So here it is clearly mentioned the goal is, what could be the reason people find it unpleasant? In the end, we reach to the gap that none of these researches are enough to convince why the sound was unpleasant. Make sense? Yeah? So there's certain difference. We set the goal in the beginning so that all the audience are in the same direction. We said it in the beginning of sentence. Any more questions? All good? In the beginning of our classes of this course, we also talked about rhetorical moves, and I shared a YouTube video earlier, very earlier, if you remember, which is very critical, I know. So I decided to embed rhetorical moves, to talk about the rhetorical moves with the same example, with the same passage, so that we all can understand, and if you have questions, we can easily respond to that. So, 3 steps, rhetorical moves. Now, why I included this? The 6 steps, I also said in my video, it's like a building, the whole structure that we just have seen. The 6 steps: goal, commence, illustrate examples, and you mention your gap, all these 6 steps. That's like the whole building. Rhetorical moves are tools that we see in every sentence, overlapping, like brick of the building. So do not get confused with these 2 approaches. And it's the most difficult part, I agree, to identify, because it overlaps. Like if I have to count every brick, it's easy to see the wall, the building. You have a question?
Could you repeat that last part, because you said like don't confuse them, like they are different?
Yeah, I mean, we have, don't confuse the 6 steps with rhetorical moves. The 6 steps is a very basic building structure. Like this building, it has 3 floors.
For an essay, right? For the whole essay.
For literature review, we have been talking about synthesizing matrix. Yeah, so you all have submitted an Excel sheet. You all have cited your resource materials. But you changed your topic, by the way.
Yeah,
so you have to do that again. Yeah. So you have to do all the, send again the Excel sheet. Yeah. We'll get there today. I'll show you the Excel sheet also of your individual topic. So what we discussed, 6 steps is a very basic structure of literature review. Now, if you want to understand how one sentence moves from one to the other, that's rhetorical move.
Okay.
We got the difference at least? Now, what's a rhetorical move? Where is that? Gotcha. So, 3 moves we have. We call rhetorical moves in literature review or in any academic writing. The 3 moves are grounding, forwarding, countering. Now, I have also mentioned the examples. Which sentence we can consider as grounding, which sentence is forwarding, which sentence is countering. So let's talk about the grounding first. I also shared in the video what is grounding. If you have watched it, grounding happens in 4 ways. We set our grounds by defining or sharing certain key concepts. And when we are borrowing others' ideas, we also try to locate a claim. That's framing. So when we are defining something, the next extension of that definition is expected to mention something out of it, not only referring something, not only citing something, but also we frame certain claims. We might not take the whole paper. We just want to take one claim out of it, whatever sources you have. And then we give examples. That could be your example, could be a cited example. Finally, we authorize. So this is the way we situate a claim. So one claim is done in 4 steps. You define by sharing others' ideas, then you frame a certain claim, and then you give an example, and you authorize finally. That becomes your claim. Thereby, you finally establish your claim. So it's defining, framing, illustrating, and we'll see examples now from the same passage that we have already read. For instance, sentence 3. So a shared definition we see here. scrapping sounds within this category. Fingernails scrapped on a blackboard has been considerable interest. So it's a shared definition which has been said. It has not been defined yet. It will go. It starts with sentence 3. We see a shared definition because more than 3 or 4 authors have been cited. Let me take you to the passage. Have a look at sentence 3. It's not one paper that has been cited in this one sentence. By understanding, if you locate the year of publication, you would see that 1, 2, 3, 4. So actually 4 papers, I'm not talking about authors, I'm saying 4 papers have been cited. So it starts with a shared definition. So 4 of these papers is talking about why, or investigating why the sounds of scrapbook or scrapping sounds are unpleasant. So we start with a shared definition. And then also, it will go individual definitions too. For instance, let me show you. So sentence 6, when we talk about the vestigial reasons, as I just said, from frequency to it shifted to this. So what this paper defined, or how it defined the vestigial reasons, it's talking here. Then what is tamarine? That's also defined, and also with an example. What kind of monkeys also respond similar to that kind of unpleasant sounds. Here also we see a kind of a definition in sentence 10. So 3, 6, 10. And then when we talk about claim, framing. So you're not only defining something, but in every definition, after you define a concept, or you talk about or share an idea, the next extension is expected, as I just said. You have to locate certain claims out of it. For example, negative reactions here. So that's the claim you found from that research. It's not your claim. People respond negatively if any sound is here. So that's how you're framing every paper that you have cited. What you want to bring out of that paper. You framed certain aspects. You again framed sentence 5. Now, gradually the frame will lead you to your final claim. So, paper 1 talked about frequency. Then something else mentioned. This differs from very early research. So you are gradually progressing your claim. Something differs with early research. So we are now expecting that the problem we found. So you found a problem in that. So you are framing gradually. So you define it. When we frame it, that means we narrow it down. We don't need to understand the whole paper that you are citing. You are narrowing it down. So that's what we call framing. Another example of framing. It's a reference of someone. So Blake concluded that they still have some innate reaction mechanism, which is the vestigial reasons. So they have some vestigial reasons. So that's sentence 8, we have framing again. 11, 12, 13, also framing. So when we are saying framing, that means we are not only citing. There's a difference between definition and framing. When you are defining, you're generally defining. When you're framing, you bring a claim on board. We understand these two differences? Definition could be general, but when you frame, you bring a claim on board. Please?
With the framing, you were saying that we are including a claim of the authors that we are citing, right? Are we paraphrasing those claims from the authors, or
Could be an interpretation also
could be an interpretation
of yours.
my interpretation?
Yeah, or could be cited.
Or could be cited?
Yeah.
And you said like we don't need to understand the whole paper. Is that correct? You saying that like because we are framing, like we just need to.
You have to. Readers do not need to. You are the writer, so you have actually read everything about that research. Thank you for asking this question. Let me overview something again. You read a research. Now you are defining that concept. One sentence, two sentences, one paragraph, one paper. That's the length is not the point. So you mentioned that's defining. Now I'm a reader. I'll not read every bibliography or reference you have mentioned, all the papers. I need to know what's your claim on that paper.
Okay.
So that's framing. The next sentence, you'll frame why you brought that paper on board. You are framing your, please.
Yeah, you were saying that you choose certain papers
Correct.
to lead you to your topic,
Right.
to your research.
Right.
So in hearing framing, do you think, for example, would you say that first you can show articles that show something positive, let's say, and then you contrast that information that shows negative reactions or something that leads you to your research question? Could be that like framing.
Now, what you're saying is, let's say, I got your question.
Yeah.
So when we see a definition, so let's say what MacDormand and Hauser explored, it's not about positive and negative. What they explored, that is mentioned. When you are mentioning what has been done, that's defining. Now, when you find a problem there, that's framing, because you are leading to a claim now.
It's more like interpretation of the definition. So framing is like my interpretation of.
Yeah, right, correct. Because that gap,
It must take-
you are identifying that gap in that paper. We're good to go with these two steps. You're defining something was explored and experimented. The next sentence you're saying, this does not include something. Now we got it? Illustrating is quite easy, I got it. I mean, I hope we'll not have any confusion when we say examples. Now that example could be yours or someone else also. Either you're citing someone or it's your own experiments or your own experience. When we see illustrations like, for instance, what Blake did, so that's an example was given. This is also an example, but this illustration is writer's own comment. This illustration is not cited. The previous one was cited. So the writer is saying, illustrating that a human mechanism responds the same way as monkey does. Here also, participants were shown something. That's also an illustration. It's an example. Participants were shown a picture and what was the result of it. So it's also an illustration. Authorizing is our claim, and that's sentence 18 and 19. We already talked about it. The final step 6, where we mentioned our gap, what my paper will be dealing with. So you have now the authority to establish that my paper will fill up this gap that this previous 3, 4, 5, 10, 12, 15, 20 researchers couldn't. Gotcha? Huh? 2 sentences, just have a look. Now the frequency of a sound is somewhat less important, which was the first lead, if you remember, the frequency of human sound. And then, given the smaller number of studies, however, it remains unclear. So you are now authorizing the final claim. Thereby we set the grounds. Questions, confusions?
In which part of the article do you suggest using this? Or it has to be in every part of the article?
These 2 sentences?
The grounding.
Oh, the grounding. In the whole synthesis, we start with grounding. Because, as I just showed you, establishing a shared definition for a key concept. That's the definition of defining. So we actually begin with it. Whatever your paper is, whatever your topic is, you start establishing shared definitions of previous works. Any questions? All good? The next is forwarding, which is quite easy. Now, forwarding is also, it's now the next, when I say next, it doesn't mean a next paragraph. The whole concept of grounding forwarding is actually embedded in every sentence, as I just said. What is forwarding? We borrow someone's point and we do not stop there. That's why we call it forwarding. We do not stop there, we extend it. And I've just shown you various examples. Whenever something was borrowed, something was cited, it was extended. And the reason of this extension is you'll combine 2 conclusions, 3 conclusions, 4 conclusions in order to authorize your final claim, which is we call synthesis. So it's combining 2 or more pieces. Extension, we'll say an example, let's say, the best example is sentence 11, let's see. Let's read sentence 10, 11, and 12 and try to understand which was borrowed, which was extended, and which is synthesizing. Sentence 10. McDermott explores something. So it's borrowed. Any confusion here? Right? And then we see that 11, both humans and chimeranes have similar reactions to unpleasant sounds. Now you're extending it after borrowing it, because you have to reach to your synthesis. And you synthesize that it differs with something, with earlier researchers. And thereby you again brought, in this synthesis, Blake again. It started, it talked about McDermott, and this passage ended that why I brought McDermott on board, because with this argument, I have to defeat what Blake said, right? After exploring McDermott's concept, you're saying it puts Blake's theory in a false position, or raises a question in earlier what we talked about Blake's theory. So that's synthesis, when you merge multiple sources. So that's what we call forwarding. We borrow, we extend that so that we can synthesize with 2 or 3 sources. Questions, confusions? I get this topic for the end so that we understand and do more exercises. That's why I didn't discuss rhetorical moves in the very beginning. I know it's very critical, but discussion can only solve it, no matter how much video slides and examples I show you. You have to ask questions that you have, whatever is confusing. So feel free. No questions? In the rhetorical move, and feel free to ask questions even if you something realize in the end of the class, that's also fine. So we talked about grounding. We do grounding in 4 ways. We define, we frame, we illustrate, we authorize. And while doing grounding, we also do forwarding. Forwarding means we borrow and we do not stop there. We extend that and we synthesize, which means we merge 2, 3 concepts to reach my conclusion. Now, while grounding and forwarding, we also face this. Countering. Countering can be done in 2 ways. Please.
Sorry.
No worries. This is actually for discussion.
What's the difference between the extending and framing?
There's no difference. It sometimes overlaps, yes. When we frame, we cannot frame something if we don't extend it. Very good, thank you. You're framing something after borrowing or defining, so these steps overlap. You're framing a claim, you cannot do it without extending what you have borrowed. You know? So that's why I said the best metaphor for rhetorical moves would be bricks. Because one after the other, we overlay it. Make sense? We extend someone's claim and thereby we frame it. If we say in that way, now it's easier to understand. Okay.
No, I'm good.
Good. The first time I'm using two, it takes a little time to get used to it. We can do countering in two ways. We argue another side, and we uncover values, or we mention gaps. One, I said, arguing something that you presented. Whenever we see the word differ, whenever we see the word argue, it's pretty obvious to understand. This is actually the final claim. If you read uncovering values, which means you're examining how biases and gaps in thinking may have influenced others' claims. So it's actually the final step 6, the gap you mentioned, that's countering. And we see this step everywhere whenever you found, let's say in sentence 11, we just have seen an argument. You presented McDermott's concept and then you proved it wrong, proved Blake's concept wrong by extending and synthesizing. That's called countering. Countering is pretty easy to understand because of the words we see. That's a counter. Yeah. So these findings call into question, that's also a counter. So counter could be your own counter, or you can bring someone else to counter someone else. Let's say you're bringing source B to counter source A. Or you talked about sentence A and B, and you are giving your own logic countering A and B. Yeah? Just argument. So the difficult thing might be to understand or to find out grounding, because that has 4 layers. You define, you frame, you illustrate, and you authorize. Forwarding, I guess forwarding is easier because you borrow, you extend, you synthesize. Counter is easy to guess what is countering when there is an argument or refute. Any questions?
So forwarding has 3 steps.
Yeah.
Where you
Borrow,
the
extend it,
extend it.
synthesize, which means you add your conclusion.
And how long the sentence is, like in doing the borrow and extend it and synthesize? Because this is in a sentence, right? Like in a few sentences?
You're synthesizing?
The framing, because all of these 3 are, no, this is the forward.
Forwarding, right, forwarding. We can take time. We can reflect what we just saw and heard, and then ask questions.
Could you explain, at first stage, what's the, I'm a little confused about rhetorical moves and 6 steps.
Yeah, so I also said that in the video, I knew that it's very obvious to happen, and we all have gone through it, even I have gone through it, the how to separate it when I first learned about these things. 6 steps is the building. Rhetorical moves is the brick. The bricks that we use, and all the tools we use to make the whole building. So that's the difference. 6 steps is the very basic overall structure. And rhetorical moves are in every sentence.
Oh, okay.
6 steps might not be in every sentence, might be section-wise. This section talks about goal. That section talks about the research gap. This whole section is actually comments. But rhetorical moves might be multiple rhetorical moves, are, let's say, framing, which is we call grounding. In framing, we can also have extending that we got from forwarding.
So framing is another rhetorical move? I thought it was extended.
Let me show you again. No worries. So when we talk about grounding, so we have defining, framing, illustrating, and authorizing. And while doing framing, locating a claim within the context of prior scholarship, that means we are borrowing prior scholarship, what was done before, right? We're borrowing something, and we're not stopping there, because we need to get to a claim. We're not stopping when we borrow, we extend it. That's framing. And when we extend it, we might give an example also. So these are all interconnected like a spider web.
Okay.
We illustrate by giving an example. That's also an extension. You're extending a claim, right? For instance, now let's go to framing and then grounding. Let's go to forwarding, right? So when I said forwarding, so we borrow, extend, and synthesize. So when we talk about borrow, extend, and synthesize, can we leave grounding? We cannot. That is also included here. When we are borrowing and extending, we are doing our grounding also, right? Because we are locating a claim. We are framing it. And when we say synthesizing, combining 2 or more pieces, while doing it, we illustrate with an example. Questions?
So what would be the big, if any, a big difference between grounding and forwarding? Because we talked about that they are intertwined and they're some of the, so like illustrating here is, like it calls illustrating, but in the forwarding can be like an extended way.
Right.
So it seems like they share a lot of
Common similarities, correct?
Yeah, but is there any difference here, or should not approach this as that? You know?
I got your point, what you're saying. Now, when we are grounding, we see grounding even in introduction chapter. That's the basic difference. In literature review, because it's not necessary when I'm talking about grounding, I'm borrowing something. Forwarding starts when you borrow something, and that's where they overlap. Let me say again, in introduction, let's say you are not citing anyone, if the paper is like that. Still you'll have this grounding. Still you'll have a definition that you are giving maybe. Still you'll have framing, you will locating claim. Still you'll give examples. You will reach a final claim. Now forwarding happens when you bring, like in research paper, you bring other resource and research papers, journals, previous works. But in any essay, let's say it's not a research paper, you'll have grounding. Whether it's a school essay, writing anything about a river, about a reading table, about anything, when we write, we cannot write anything without grounding. That's a very, very basic. Now we got it? Whatever essays we have written all over our lives, you'll see you have these 4 things that makes the essay convincing and beautiful. You have grounding, which is you not only define, you give an example, you authorize a certain claim, you frame certain things, which means you narrow it down. Now, forwarding happens when you borrow multiple research papers. That happens in graduate studies level. Make sense? That's why they overlap in research papers. The introduction will definitely have grounding. The literature review will have grounding and forwarding both. And if it's an argumentative essay, if it's not a scientific innovation, then countering will also be included. Questions? We had a long class of lectures. Bored? Too many things on the head? Let me know, how can I help? Which thing you think is a confusion? You can pick up sentences even, if you want. Let's do a task. It'll be easier. Now what we'll do, click on this in Canvas. Don't start doing anything. I mean, I haven't explained what you have to do. Just click on the thing. So you'll see 9 papers there, right? 9 research articles. You don't have to read those 9 research articles. For instance, in order to give you feedback, am I reading all of the research articles you have sent me? You have sent me maybe 3, 4, 5, 10, right? I'm not reading those resources. I'm reading what you are writing. But I'm having an overview idea of what's there. You can do that by skimming, by reading the abstract, the first thesis statement. Make sense? You don't have to read the 9 research papers. This is what we all have already done. You know your papers, okay? Let's say here we have 9 research papers. On which topic? This is the topic. Egg consumption on the increased risk of heart disease. So, when I eat eggs, am I increasing the risk of my heart disease or not? So based on this, there are 9 research papers given here. And usually when we write literature review, these are the basic questions we ask ourselves. Which paper should I include and which not? You don't have to include all the 9 when we write a synthesizing literature review. You choose, and that's a judgment call. In the last class, we also said that. Yeah. So you are the god of it. You decide, this one I don't want, this one I want. That's it. And then what we do? We draw a conclusion. The process we draw that conclusion, grounding, forwarding, countering. Now, there is a synthesis. You can see, if you scroll down, done for you. You don't have to do anything. So let's say this is the synthesizing matrix, the Excel sheet you have sent, for instance. So this article talks about this article talks about that, just a brief glimpse. And then we have a synthesized paragraph. Now your task is page 222 that we read in the last class, instructor's comments that you have already read, if you remember. Page 222. Instructor's comments. So this is the one, yeah. The similar comments you will make on this. You don't have to write a synthesis. You have to comment on this synthesis, whether on flow, whether it does not have a proper grounding, forwarding web, or whether it has missed step 6, the gap, or step 5, the comment. Make sense what I'm saying? It's a very short passage, not a very long one also. So we'll read it in groups, not alone. And then we'll see the problems we find here, or what we do not like about it. Easy task? Yeah? And if you want what was done in that research, the PDF is given. If you want to have a skim through the abstract, or what's that research I need to know, then you can go through it. You don't need to go through those 9 PDFs, I would say right now, reading all those. That'll take a lot of time. But you can have a glimpse into the thesis statement, the abstract. Make sense? So the task is, we'll find problems or we'll comment on this, like the instructor's comments in the last class we did. Let's do it in group. And you can form the group the way you want. And it's not a perfect synthesis, by the way. There will be problems, or there should be comments that this is something missing, which is obvious.
It is LDL.
Mm-hmm.
LDL.
It's a medical term.
Medical term.
Yeah. Then full of medical terms, this whole passage.
It's related to the cholesterol.
Cholesterol.
Lower density.
You're also medicine?
No, that's separate.
Sorry about this.
So is eating eggs every day?
Hmm?
Eating eggs every day?
No, I'm not saying that the research is right. We have to find that out.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm eating eggs, that means I'll die. So even if we breathe, we'll die.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. Even if I drink water, I'll die. Should I stop drinking water? It allows you to comment right there. You can submit it, right? Yeah, so I want you guys to write whatever comments you have. It does not have this, that. It has this, that. I don't like this and that, whatever. It allows you?
Yes.
Okay. Nice. No length limit. If you want to comment short, big, small, large, whatever. But discuss with your team. It has too many terms, it's not for general audience, whatever. And let me repeat, the main objective is to include what we learn in the comments. 6 steps as a basic structure, and between sentences, rhetorical moves. That's what we'll comment. At least 1 or 2 comments I am expecting you'll do right. At least a few, so that you get an overview, a reflection of what we learned. You don't have to edit. You just have to comment, by the way.
Was it,
Do not correct it. Huh?
was it the 6 that you can handle
You don't have to mention all the 6 steps if you find it difficult. I mean, you can just mention a few. Nice. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, so my first one was define the colors. And it was one of the colors that I was in steps.
You guys
Ah, there's one.
Any questions?
Consumption and higher how about the second one? So like very close. So what is the consumption?
It is there, so there's a mix.
And I think there's no conclusion, right?
Correct. That's the most important thing is.
Yeah, there's no.
First thing that you get, so what? That's the answer we get. So what? I've got it. This is what. So what?
Do you see any conclusions? The 6 steps. The 6 steps.
The second step, the last one.
Oh, we also working on the 6 steps.
Yeah. Let's talk about the 6 steps first, and then.
Should we spot the errors or just follow the 6 steps?
Comments, yes. Let's say step 6 is not there. Then you say that it's not there. If it's there, then say you don't have to say anything.
No, because I'm saying.
If it's perfect, then just write it's perfect, you know? And if there's a problem, then just mention that. You don't, actually, by feedback, we do not mean praising, we mean corrections, right?
But I don't want to be harsh.
I know, so,
This is your idea.
Or is it like,
huh?
did you write this down?
No, I'm not a medicine though. I'm a literature and cinema person. I only know how to write. What to write, you guys know.
Need to provide context or recall ourselves.
Yes, I know.
And there is no example.
He or she should mention example.
Well, it's not on play, but it's like for illustration.
Okay. So they are. Yeah, and this one, yeah, so, it's like, well, what's the best thing?
Something. For some still true.
We can mention that as
But there is a gap, right?
in simple
There is a gap. So 6 includes gap and
Maybe that's not make it chronological. It's true, but it is false.
so we can say there is no, I mean, it's 7 or 6 is
There's a-
there is a gap, so I can say there is no unique conclusion.
Yeah, exactly.
There is also no surprising.
Done? Awesome. Then you can submit it there.
there is no minimum number of
Whatever. Relax.
code there.
Mirror.
If you're done, then you can submit also there. Nice, thank you. Same here, you open, submit. Use that local section here.
Yeah, we can set the budget.
to it.
Are you second year?
No, master is because of that one fantastic research.
If we don't try this, somewhat.
Yeah,
You're right, logically, the information is counted. But the language is not explicitly used, that it is accounted. Yeah. But the information is presented as accounted.
second.
It's 5 years.
All my children will join me. Years.
You can get back? Okay. I hope you all have submitted. I'll comment on your submissions in Canvas later. Now, the thing is, what we did, the literature review section, you can add this to your introduction that you have submitted, the draft introduction that you submitted before the spring break. Or you can have it as a separate chapter. I am not requiring right now the final assignment, just a practice of this synthesis. Only 200, 300 words or 15, 20 sentences. Like in the book, in page 223, the task that we did on non-present sound research. So we have here 19 sentences. So 200 to 300 words, a synthesis of what you have presented already. You have presented a huge data, right? I'm not going through every spreadsheet. What I suggest, so let's say you have presented your source, your topic and main idea. Now if you have to do the same, write a synthesis, paragraph, one paragraph, you are allowed to write multiple paragraphs if you want, but at least one. Okay, before next Monday, and it will be a peer review. So anonymously or automatically someone else will be assigned to give a comment, the way you just commented on this particular synthesis right now. You'll comment on the others. Okay?
Let's be nice with each other.
I'm sure everyone is nice. And this, I included the 6 steps and rhetorical moves only with this batch in the last 2 years of my career here at Notre Dame, because it's difficult, and I felt this batch is brilliant in my 2 years experience here at Notre Dame. 5 semesters experience, this is the best batch I have found, by the way. So do not feel demotivated. I know it's high above the bar. I mean, this rhetorical moves and the 6 steps that we're doing. But the reason I included it, because I felt the level deserves it, the level that this batch has. I do not mean to hurt any previous batch, but in my 5 semesters experience here, this is the best, brilliant batch, I would say. Bluntly, straightforward, yeah. So that's why I thought to make it a little difficult in a way so that you can actually challenge yourself and learn something new and grow. I could have avoided this part, I know, and it was not even in the syllabus, even before me, whoever was teaching, it was not there. But I guess it helps when you know the way you can practice it. Read your scholarly articles, the PDFs that you have sent, the PDFs or the articles that you have listed. When you read those literature reviews, can you find extending, borrowing, grounding, framing, defining, illustrating or not? When you read, the more you are able to see, it will help you shaping your own writing later. And it will happen as a cognitive subconscious learning. You'll not realize in the beginning, but the more you can see the webs. So for instance, in the last 2 years, I have been reading so many papers every day of every discipline, not about only my discipline, that paper that I write, but also while reading others. So I can see the web whenever at a glance I see any paper, so that I can give feedback. Okay, so extending is missing. So whenever you'll be submitting your own paper to journals, let me tell you that you might not always get comments line by line, right? Let's say a professor of another university that you've submitted a journal, to a journal to publish a paper, commented a paragraph in the email, not underlining every sentence in the 10,000 words paper. So when they will comment you, they might write, for instance, would you please give more reference on your illustration part? Now you'll understand what the comment means, because you know in the grounding you might have missed the illustrations. Make sense? So it will help you now to identify what that means when you get a comment like that. What to do when you get a comment like that. The professor might not underline each sentence that here, you need to illustrate these theories. Make sense? So that's the reason we need to understand this web. Because we'll get thousands of comments in our career if you're in the academia. And we'll do our own editings. All the best, see ya. And next Monday is the due date for the synthesis. It's in Canvas. Let me show one more thing, just 1 second. I know we are almost done. So if you click this link, it will show you more examples and theoretical perspectives on rhetorical moves if you need to know more, even beyond the slide. It's in Canvas in our module section. Thank you, see ya on Monday.